Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Listen, today we have someone special for you to meet. Farah is going to share with us her story of her memoir and how she came to write this book. Farah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So one of the ways I like to kick this off is to give my guests an opportunity to do just a quick little bio of who you are and where you're coming from, and specifically how you've embraced this idea of starting again.
Hey, it feels like a loaded question in terms of who you are and where you're coming from. So I'm coming from the other end of the world. I think I'm in Dubai
Yes.
as I speak to you, and technology is a marvelous thing at connecting us across the world.
It
It's really, I think that's one of the joys of it. When it works well and we can talk in real time and share experiences, that's amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the backstory of where I come from, again, a slightly longer version. So in Dubai, everyone here is from a different part of the world, right? So typically, if you go out and you meet new people, the first question they'll ask you is, where are you from? And I always have to do a little mental check. Do I give the long answer or the short answer?
Yes.
So for your listeners, if I go into the long answer, I was born in London and I'm born in a Parsi home. And Parsis are Zoroastrian by faith. We come from Persia. And the group of people that went from a port called Pars to India to seek asylum are called Parsis. So they're a community within the Zoroastrians. So that's sort of as a ethnic background, if you like. And then when I was 4 years old, my mother, who was born in India, took me to India to see my maternal grandmother. And we ended up staying there 14 years through a series of circumstances. And the sort of modern idea of emotional parenting, where you sit the child down and explain what's going on, was not the style back then. Definitely not the experience back then. And we just stayed, and Mum put me in school into the school she had been to, and it was a Catholic convent. And we were in a little town in North India, which was a Muslim town predominantly. It had been ruled by the Nawabs, and it was quite historic. When the British were ruling, there was a big mutiny that took place. It depends which part of history, which side of history you're on. It might be called the uprising, but we call it the mutiny. And I grew up surrounded by all these different cultural reference points and experiences. And as a child, perhaps maybe I didn't appreciate the variety quite so much. But as an adult, it's allowed me to straddle geographies, cultures, and just be able to talk to people and connect at a human level, and be open to differences, and allowed me to live around the world. So from India, when I was 18, I went back to London, and then in 2001, relocated to Dubai, and Dubai has been my home since. So that's the long version of the answer.
Well,
of where I'm from.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's interesting that we often have experiences as children that we don't appreciate in the moment, and it's only later that we can see the value that they provided to us. So that's pretty awesome that you can do that. And yes, your story is very interesting. You're quite the world traveler.
I am. I enjoy travel, and life has given me the opportunity and the reason to travel as well. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. And it sort of feeds into what you're asking about starting again. It's, if I look at each sort of milestone, age 4, I go from London to India. So it's that whole displacement. It's finding myself, learning a new language, always being a little bit different. I spoke with a British accent in a little town in India. I looked a little bit different, got big curly hair, which you don't see. This has been blow dried. It was starting again. It was starting my life. The life I knew up until the age of 4 was not the life I had in India at all. aged 18, leaving India to go back to London. And although that was my choice and it was something that I was looking forward to, I went to London thinking I was going to study to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor. And again, circumstance, life, maybe that's not what the universe had planned for me. I ended up in banking, and that's been my career for the last 30 years. I started in banking as a trainee aged 18, and I've worked my way up from there to today. And that was a start. Again, it was sort of letting go of this dream of being a doctor to embrace this reality of being in the finance world and finding my feet in London without very much support, and just learning to be financially independent and to become my own person. And then when I became a mother, I got married, I became a mother, then we relocated to Dubai. And again, it was a different reality. So now I'm giving up my corporate life to embrace motherhood for a little bit. Again, finding myself in a new culture, defining who I am and how I fit into this, country that was embracing so many different cultures. When I was 36, I lost my mom. So it was dealing with grief and loss, and how do you redefine myself? Mom had been the only present parent, and it was, now I don't have that person who I would call. Anything good would happen, I'd want to call her. Anything not good, I want to call her, and I didn't have her anymore. And then subsequently, I got divorced. And again, it's that loss of identity. I could not introduce myself as somebody's wife. I was my own person and having to redefine who I was. And as it so happened, there was a work situation that occurred in the same week. And it was a complete loss of identity in terms of the corporate structure and the marital status, and redefining all of that. So I think starting again seems to have been a little bit of a theme.
Yeah, it's definitely woven into your story time and time again. And I love how you kind of highlighted, we have these start again moments, sometimes by our own choosing, but oftentimes not by our choice at all. And it's kind of how you embrace that, finding yourself over and over again, or redefining. I think sometimes it's this finding yourself is kind of a self-discovery phase of remembering who you were, or also deciding how to be different moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you want to be. And I read something, or I heard something today which said, life is not random, and the circumstances in our life are not random. It's there to help us grow. Each sort of lesson has that growth aspect, germinating in it, that, as you say, if we take it on board and say, okay, I want to do this different, or I want to be different. And as you rightly say, whether by choice or by design, but either way, it's not like you can not change, or you can stop the tide of time. You've got to work with what's coming at you and just figure out how you're going to make it work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the one question I have is kind of, at what point in this phase or this story of your life did you decide, I want to write a book, and a memoir is what I'm going to do?
Well, I'm not quite sure it was that conscious a thought process, to be honest. Again, it was quite organic. When I lost I've always journaled, as a starting point. I've always journaled, I've written, I write good work emails, I'm told. So it's a skill that's been honed over the years. Okay. And then when I lost my mom, as part of the therapy, there was a lot of journaling and trying to access your emotion through word and trying to plumb the depths of that sort of grief and sorrow. And then it was literally sitting down and just writing, and the words were coming out around the main incident of how we lost mom. And then I started weaving the story around it, around my childhood, which had been slightly unconventional. My mother was this larger-than-life character who led a different life for her time and age in India. And when you say memoir, I thought about, should I make it fiction? Should I, embellish the story? Should I change the narrative a little bit to focus on some of the, women's rights issues that are emerging in the theme of the story? But I think my brain is so linear that I just could not find that voice. And I kept coming back to the narrative voice of sort of fact and how it was, and which sort of became the memoir that it was. And again, publishing it has not been the straight road. You see the finished product, and I talk to you about the finished product, but getting here has been definitely a long road and a long journey. Lots of rejections along the way, a lot of having to re-pivot and figure out, okay, this door's closed. How do I do it differently? And sometimes in life, as with most things, I think timing is key. And I think this was the time. And people came into my orbit that supported me and helped me. And here I am talking to you.
Well, I love that because it's validating a lot of what I know to be true about writing a book, and how it's almost as if the book knows what it's going to be, even if you haven't fully recognized it yet. I know there were many times I sat down. So I've written both fiction and nonfiction. And when I would sit down to write my fictional novel, it would just kind of go in a different direction. It went where the story was going to go. Even if I was like, okay, today we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about X, Y, Z. And it just sort of goes where it needs to go. And that was definitely my experience, which sounds like that's kind of what happened for you as well. And I think, yes, the journey to publishing is anything but a straight and narrow path. I think it mirrors life in that way. It's this meandering journey, and divine timing is a big part of it, for sure. So my next question, well, actually, before we do that, tell everyone what the name of your book is and where they can find it.
Thank you. So the name of the book is Meher and Me. My mother's name was Meher. So it's essentially a mother and daughter relationship story. It tells about our bond and the trajectory of our bond, how I lost mom, and then how I found tools to help me get over the loss of her. And hopefully your listeners, when they get the book or read the book, will take something from it which will help them in their life journey. And I look forward to hearing all about their feedback on the book, which they can find at most online retailers and Amazon or Barnes & Nobles or Ingram, any platform of their choice. Meher and Me, if they search, they'll find it and can obtain it.
Well, that's fabulous. I personally cannot wait to read it. And I do think my listeners, will have
potential readers.
Yes, potential readers. I think my listeners will find value in this story because, I started this podcast as kind of my own start again moment as I was building a business all around helping women heal after divorce and kind of finding the opportunity in what feels like a loss. And I've made the connection many times that grief is grief. And sometimes it's grieving the loss of a marriage, and sometimes it's grieving the loss of a person. And so I think in both scenarios, like finding tools and how to work through that process, because grief is different for everybody. Each instance of a loss, I think, is different. And the way we approach it and the way we move through it, because you don't get over it, you get through it, is different for everybody. So I think when you're highlighting tools that have helped you and that story, I think they'll find a lot of value there.
Thank you. No, and I completely echo what you say. It is finding what works for you. Everyone's different, and your version of grief is going to be different. It could be the loss of someone, but it could be the death of a relationship, like a divorce, or it could be any other version of grief. And how you receive it and how you experience it and how you get through it will, differ for each individual. But the tools are something I definitely do advocate, because they just help ground you. They help you navigate, and kind of what you almost need to be able to master is your thought and your mind, and whatever gives you that pause in between the cyclical sort of thought process is the tool that you need that's going to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on something else that I want to highlight and call out specifically, and that is when someone has taken the time and energy and poured love into writing a book, one of the most valuable pieces of feedback we can get is reviews on those books. So I will ask on your behalf that anybody who does go out and purchase a copy of your book, that they circle back and leave a review for you, because I know how valuable those are.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And it's true. It means it is what it is. But it's also great to hear feedback, and I'd love to hear experiences, and they can come to the website and share their stories and connect with me directly and pick up a conversation, or even on social media. I'd love to engage and build that community and hear from people, and hopefully, we're all in this together. It's not
Yes.
like any of us have this figured out, really.
Yeah, it's true. It is true. Well, I see a lot of inspiration in your story, but I'm curious to know what inspires you most about your own story.
I think if I look back, and even as I'm narrating my start against to you, I think each juncture has been about self-reliance or mastering self-reliance and self-sufficiency, whether it's through the absence of a father figure, whether it's through the loss of my mum, whether it's financial freedom or subsequent divorce, which also sort of cements the financial independent that
Does have a
narrative.
tendency to do that.
Yeah, it sure does. I think the recurring theme for me is always about self-sufficiency. And I think if that lesson I've mastered, and if I look back at my trajectory, for your listeners out there, I don't have a degree. I started working aged 18. I'm self-made entirely. But it just shows you, with a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of hard work, determination, grit, perseverance, if you can apply yourself, you can achieve, I say success, but success means different things to different people, right? But you can achieve whatever it is that makes you happy. It's about not giving up when the going gets tough. And trust me, the going did get tough a lot of times. It's just being able to pick yourself up, and if you can just get up in the morning and show up, you get through the day, and the days sort of lead to different outcomes and different sort of realities. But it's about, I think, if you can dream it and if you're willing to work towards it, you can make it happen. I think that would be, I hope people would find that inspirational. I know for me, even the book, it was a dream, right? It was something I wrote, and I was like, okay, I've written this now. I want to get it, worthy of publishing. So you work on it with people. I revised it. I edited it. I would come home from work, move from my work laptop to my personal laptop, and get on Zoom with people around the world who were helping me create the book and curate the book. So I think dream the dreams as big as you want. Be prepared to work for them. Stick at it. And hopefully, there is no limit to what you can achieve.
I completely agree with everything you've said wholeheartedly. And I often remind people, because I feel like it's a reminding, it's not a advice giving. But our desires are not given to us for no reason. Like, you have a desire within you, however quiet the whisper, pay attention. And I think you're right. If you can dream it, it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and if you've got the dream, then you've also got the potential within you to make it happen. Because, your dream may not be my dream, because I may not have the same potential, right? So,
absolutely.
Honor those dreams, I'd say, because it's somewhere there's an untapped ability that, is whispering to you to be let out, or to be given life, or to, for people to witness.
Absolutely. And I think you hit on something that's really important. We don't all want the same things, which is why success looks different to everybody, and our dreams are different. The first time I ever saw this kind of come to life for me and really solidify, I was in a dating workshop, and all of the women in this workshop went around and kind of described who their ideal partner would be. And it was this profound aha moment for me, because I thought, we are not all looking for the same man, not even the same gender in some situations. Like, we're not looking for the same people. And so it was really this eye-opening, like, it's what I want, so it's possible for me, which was really empowering, and it affects, every aspect of your life for sure.
Yeah, because your needs are, a culmination of your prior experience, your background, your upbringing, your, whatever environment you've grown up with, and, your thought process, your conditioning. So each of us is going to be a different blueprint, looking for something very, very different. But it's possible that we all find, what we're looking for.
Yeah,
hopefully.
absolutely. Well, and so you kind of gave me a great segue into this next question, which is if you kind of look backwards and look at any one of these younger versions of you, what advice would you give her?
I think I would definitely ask her to believe in herself a bit more. I think I struggled with low self-esteem, um, growing up in India, sort of displaced, not really knowing where I belonged and who I was, and not being as comfortable in my own skin. I think I struggled with self-esteem, and because my mum was this larger than life, you're almost in that shadow a little bit
Mm,
without it ever being intentional. But going to London, finding myself was also, it took a long time to become who I am talking to you today. This has come over years. This is not who I was,
hmm
as a younger me. And I would definitely tell her she can believe in herself a bit more and trust her instincts. My instincts are quite strong, and it's only when I've ignored them or seen the red flags but ignored them, things have not gone to plan. So it's
Yes.
definitely a life lesson I've learned. Okay, if that red flag is up there, do not ignore, or ignore at your own peril, kind of thing.
Ignore at your own peril. I love it. Yes, that's true. I think I say it a little differently, but it's the same thing. It's learning to trust yourself and your intuition and knowing that it is true guidance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely is. Definitely is.
Well, so when you look forward and think about what's coming next, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
Wow. I think back to, if I can dream it and I'm willing to work for it, it can come. One of my dreams that I would love to come true, and which God willing will come in the future, is I'd love to have a cafe. So I cook a lot, I bake a
Oh,
lot,
yes.
and I dreamt of opening a cafe. And I did the work towards it, spreadsheets, scouting for locations, traveling to Italy to look for ingredients, building menus, and then again, maybe the timing was off. I didn't take the plunge then, but it is one of those dreams that I hope to fulfill one day.
I love that. And I love how different that goal is versus becoming an author or coming from
Corporate
a
life.
corporate banking life. Like that's amazing. And I think it's such an important insight. And it's an important point to make, I think, for people that just because you've gone down one path doesn't mean you can't do something vastly different moving forward. We always get to choose again, and we're not pigeonholed into a certain direction.
Correct. And it's kind of we're the sum of all of us, right? So there's one part of me that's the corporate life part of me, but I love to cook and bake and host people. I practice yoga, and I train to be a yoga teacher, and I set up a yoga club for my colleagues. And part of the thinking is cafe and yoga studio, but then I'm kind of thinking I can't get them to exercise and then feed them cake. So maybe, we cancel that. Maybe I need to have two separate lines for that dream. And I just think you can be all of whatever you are. As you say, you don't have to be in
Yeah.
any one pigeonhole or one, silo.
Yeah.
We're the sum of our experiences and the sum of all our parts.
Yeah. I think it makes me realize, like talking to my 10-year-old daughter, and she has, these very different visions of what she wants to be. She wants to be maybe a veterinarian, and maybe she wants to be an actress, and maybe a singer. And I told her one day, well, why don't you just do all of them? And she looked at me like I was crazy. How could you
Wow.
possibly do all of them? And I said, well, just do one at a time.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
just follow
Exactly.
the one that your heart is speaking to your heart the most in the moment and see where it takes you. I
Yeah.
love that.
And again, everyone's different, right? Maybe some people feel they can focus, as you say, one at a time, or
Hmm.
you can have a couple juggling.
It's
Just
true.
know your limits and your energy and how you deploy yourself. I'm juggling my day. I've
Yeah.
done the corporate life in the morning, and here I am talking to you in the evening. And if I can make it work, great. And where I figure out, I've reached my limit, that's where I'd pull back.
Yeah. And I think, if anything, if I could give my own kind of advice from this, would be just that. Like, I think our ability to recognize our limits and pull back when we sense that, I think that's one of the, we'll call it a balancing act that most women struggle with is kind of knowing what your limit is. And when you're reaching that limit, that's when it's time to give yourself permission to just back off a little bit and adjust and pivot.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's okay to have a timeout, there's no judgment attached to it. It's just,
oh my gosh, there's so much value in the timeout. I tell my children all the time, I call them mommy timeouts. When I need a minute, mommy, it's mommy timeout.
I'm going to take myself off to my naughty corner, have a minute and come back when I'm regrouped.
It's so true. It's so valuable to me. And I want them to realize that, like, the times that they've been put in a timeout, they're much older now, but in those moments, there's value in it for the person in the timeout. And so I wanted to shift it so that it wasn't a negative necessarily. And yeah, moms need breaks too.
Yeah, very good advice. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so my last question for you is, how can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram at farah.press. We are posting excerpts from the book, the podcast that I appear on, and other sort of bits of the journey. There's a website, also www.farahpress.com, and they can find me there. They can find photographs from the book and get a little more insight into the book, so they see the world I'm talking about, and I post blogs and stuff there, and some of the resources that have helped me that may help your listeners. And of course, the book available online through any of the online portals that they choose to buy it or download it from.
Fabulous. Well, I know that you will have reached a whole new audience today, and I personally am looking forward to reading your book. But thank you so much for the work you put into that work of art, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you for hosting me, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Did you like this episode, or did you love it? Inquiring minds want to know. The best way to support this show is to subscribe and leave a review. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.